I acknowledge the presence at this head table of the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Trade, Industry, Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Economic Development and Investment of St. Kitts and Nevis. Other members of the head table are Mr. Dinah Richards, who is the Permanent Secretary of Economic Development and Investment, Mr. Sean Lawrence, Director in the Ministry of International Trade, representing International Trade, Industry, Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Mr. Trevor Blake, he is the President of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce of St. Kitts and Nevis. We have also Mr. Jonathan Kelly. He is the Energy Transition Manager of the St. Kitts and Nevis Electric Company, that is SCELEC. We welcome also the staff of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Trade, Industry, Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Economic Development and Investment of St. Kitts and Nevis, citizens and residents of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis joining us live and on social media, thanks to radio stations ZZ, TV, and their platforms, and also to the ladies and gentlemen of the media. Good morning, and welcome to the press conference of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Trade, Industry, Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Economic Development and Investment of St. Kitts and Nevis. This press conference allows or is convened to allow the Honorable Minister to disseminate information to citizens and residents and persons in the diaspora to allow them to be updated on developments pertaining to the portfolio of the Honorable Minister. In this connection, the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas has just returned from the Republic of China, Taiwan. On his trip, his delegation comprised Ms. Kay Bass, who is the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who is not with us this morning, Mr. Dinah Richards, Permanent Secretary of Economic Development and Investment, Mr. Sean Lawrence, Director in the Ministry of International Trade, Mr. Trevor Blake, President of the Chamber of Industry and Commerce, and Mr. Jonathan Kelly of SCELEC. Minister Douglas will share highlights of the trip as well as touch on other matters pertaining to his portfolio. Once the Honorable Minister has completed his opening statement, he will field questions from the media. At this point, we will remind you to control your electronic devices that you use to transmit your voices, whether putting them on silent or turning them off, that's up to you. At this point, please allow me and welcome the Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Llewellyn Douglas to give his opening remarks.
Service Officer in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, St. Kitts and Nevis. First, let me take time to express my gratitude to all of you present here today and to all who are watching and listening via the different media. It gives me great pleasure to present this brief report to the citizens and residents of St. Kitts and Nevis on my recent successful diplomatic mission to the Republic of China, Taiwan, on yet another outreach to the Republic of China, and at the same time promoting trade and investment with our counterparts here in St. Kitts and Nevis and those in the Republic of China. Additionally, the pleasure is mine to highlight the various ways in which the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, International Trade, Industry, Commerce and Consumer Affairs, Economic Development and Investment is working in tandem with the wider government machinery to ensure a prosperous St. Kitts and Nevis for not only this generation, but for future generations as well. For small island developing states, SIDS, like St. Kitts and Nevis, Navigating the global economic and financial architecture can prove quite daunting. However, our diplomatic relationships with our traditional and non-traditional partners, our pride, our industrious spirit, and of course our own innovative nature coalesce to create the mettle necessary to thrive in these circumstances. Our diplomatic strategy is propelled by the government's intention to achieve a sustainable island state agenda. This means that among the plethora of international issues at every engagement, at every interaction with our allies, whether it is me or whether there are emissaries who are speaking on our behalf, we must champion our 7 pillars that form the sustainable island state agenda. And what are these pillars? 1, water security. 2, energy transition. 3, food security. 4, sustainable industry. 5, sustainable settlements. 6, circular economy. And 7, social protection and health as well. The Sustainable Island State Agenda means prosperity for Kittians and divisions. It also means no more water rationing. It means cheaper electricity, more affordable, nutritious food, eco-friendly businesses, resilient housing for our people, and wholesome protection and health care. But some may ask, where does foreign affairs fit in with this particular agenda? Our embassies, our high commissions, our consulates, our special envoys and honorary consuls are strategically placed in key capitals and cities around the world. Capital packages the agenda, it makes it palatable for our key partners, then it dispatches it to our overseas offices and have our emissaries deliver the necessary message. Our diplomats, our envoys, our consuls have all access to crucial offices in major cities worldwide. The leverage they possess by virtue of their position and their networking enables their messages to be heard in halls where everyone can enter. It is through our overseas missions that this government is advised of possible partnerships, whether bilaterally, that is, country to country, or trilaterally, that is, between more than 2 countries, or multilaterally, where there is through international organizations of which we are a part. Our mission keeps the government updated on policies from their jurisdictions that would affect our development. This is not only true of our missions, but our officers at Capital, here in Bastia, also provide ample research and analysis on developing situations where there is no established office representing St. Kitts and Nevis. They are the ones who keep the Cabinet of Ministers and our ministries informed of important matters. Today, the Federation contends with the demands of a new U.S. administration whose policies do not entirely align with our national interest. You have read that the United States administration is, in an effort to eliminate what they deem human trafficking, are demanding that third countries cease their participation in the Cuban Medical Brigade. And similar programs, or government officials will suffer the consequences of visa revocations. As I have said before, our relationship with Cuba is one that has tremendously benefited our people. now that we are further along in our development, it is critical that St. Kitts and Nevis reciprocates, as the government of Cuba and Cubans have stood by us for decades. And so we must be resolute. But at the same time, we understand the international community and the big power players around us. In Taipei, the capital of the Republic of China, Taiwan, His Excellency Dr. Francis was instrumental in coordination and execution of my recent official visit to Taiwan from the 17th of March to the 21st of March. I was accompanied by Ms. Kay Bass, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Dinah Richards, who is here with us this morning, our Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Economic Development, Mr. Sean Lawrence, our Director in the Ministry of International Trade, acting as our Permanent Secretary, Mr. Jonathan Kelly, our Energy Transition Manager at the St. Kitts Electricity Company, that is KELEC, and of course, Mr. Trevor Blake, who is the President of the St. Kitts and Nevis Chamber of Industry and Commerce. As reported, I met with President Lai and with Foreign Minister Lin on areas of mutual interest, and I received on behalf of the government his gratitude to St. Kitts and Nevis standing up for Taiwan in the international arena. At every opportunity, whether at the World Health Organization, WHO, or at the United Nations General Assembly, UNGA, or the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, St. Kitts and Nevis encourages member states to consider the inclusion of Taiwan in these organizations, even if it is simply to learn and engage with the expertise alone. It would be of benefit to the whole world. In addition to the government-to-government engagement, I was able to attend the 2025 St. Kitts and Nevis Trade and Investment Promotion Seminar during this particular visit. The delegation made plain why St. Kitts and Nevis is the best country to invest in at this time. It was Permanent Secretary Richards who outlined the advantages of investing in St. Kitts and Nevis and the ease of doing business as well. To date, there are ongoing conversations with Taiwanese companies that are eager to invest in every sector of St. Kitts and Nevis. And so this morning, in conclusion, I wish to commend the work of all of our permanent secretaries and the heads of governments within my portfolio who ensure that the day-to-day operations are running smoothly. I also commend the work of the staff of the various departments. Many times, the hard work goes unnoticed until there is a crisis. Let me say, I am grateful for your hard work and the countless hours of service you have dedicated to the work of the ministry and by extension to the people of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. I will now stop here and I will entertain questions after any of my colleagues would want to say anything. Wait just a minute.
Good morning. It was my honor to represent my ministry as well as my country, by extension, as a part of the delegation to Taiwan. While there, I focused on why they should invest in St. Kitts and Nevis, because my ministry is tasked with the carrying out the socio-economic agenda of the government, and to do so, we must rely on investments. And so at that investment forum, I outlined the importance of investing in St. Kitts and Nevis, why they should invest in St. Kitts and Nevis. For example, I spoke about the educated population that we have, 98% literacy, our infrastructure, etc. And then we focused on areas of investment. We know we have a lot of areas of investment, but we are focusing on the sustainable island state as also outlined in the National Development Planning Framework of the country, the NDPF. And so our focus was an investment that would lead to sustainable development. And so I touched on tourism, agriculture, the international education sector, international financial services, ICT, and green energy. And then my colleague, Mr. Kelly, focused on green energy. And we realized that there are many areas of investment, but then we did not go with the approach to address all areas. It will overwhelm potential investors. And so I outlined 5 areas, and what we zeroed in while we were there on green energy. And so when we visited facilities, government departments, our focus was on green energy because we know if we get our energy right, we are going to get most things right when it comes to development in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so our focus really was on green energy development, and my colleague would have shared on that. And then we outlined to potential investors also that when they choose St. Kitts and Nevis for investment, they are not left alone. Along the way, there are procedures, there are policies, there are guidelines that help them along the journey. And I focused mainly on the role of Skipper, which is our investment promotion agency, St. Kitts Investment Promotion Agency, that is responsible for promoting investments into the Federation, as well as facilitating investment, providing aftercare services and advocacy. And I also spoke about NIPA, which is our Nevis counterpart, that does the same thing. So anybody interested in investing in St. Kitts and Nevis, they can reach out to Skipper or NIPA, and they'll be guided along the journey of investment. And so the presentation was well received. Persons were showing interest in St. Kitts and Nevis. Some had not heard of St. Kitts and Nevis before. And so we focused not only on the beauty of the islands, but also the people, resilient, strong people that we are. And so persons were really interested in investment. So the groundwork was laid for persons to consider investing in St. Kitts and Nevis, and particularly in green energy. And Mr. Kelly did a presentation after I would have presented. So Mr. Kelly.
Thank you very much, P.S. Richards. Kindly allow me, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Kindly allow me to adopt the protocol already established. And it was indeed an honor and a privilege to have been part of this very prestigious delegation, ably led by our Right Honorable Dr. Denzil Douglas. And as was already mentioned, and piggybacking on remarks made by P.S. Richards and Dr. Douglas, the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, the government and the people, were on a pathway for attaining a sustainable island state. And part of one of the pillars, as already mentioned this morning, is the green energy transition. And this has to be understood not just from the standpoint of emission reductions, but also from the standpoint of energy security, decoupling ourselves from the over-dependency on imported energy in the form of fossil fuels. Presently, approximately 98% of the electricity being generated in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis is from the form of utilizing diesel fuel that is converted in these generators to provide electricity. So in that investment forum, as P.S. Richards would have outlined, we presented our ambitions. We presented the fact that we are aiming by the year 2030 to be producing 50% of the electricity demanded by the Federation from renewable energy resources and technologies, and by the year 2035, 100% of the energy to be demanded to be made from renewable energy resources and technologies. We have outlined the pathway and the strategies for development, and we outlined the need for cooperation and attracting expertise from counterparts in Taiwan. Let me just briefly mention, I won't have all time to talk about a lot of the things that we were able to touch on and to cover, but we were able to interact with experts and persons in the energy and the power sector in Taiwan where they were able to demonstrate to us how they're able to build resilient systems, how they're able to have systems that are able to allow for the integration of distributed and centralized solar and battery energy systems. We're able to visit some of those technology providers, and we're able to have that exposure. These sort of exposures now we can develop further and have further bilateral relations and conversations to bring some of these investments and these sort of technologies back to our federation to help us along our sustainable island state agenda, particularly the green energy transition. Notably, we would have met with some of the St. Kitts and Nevis students over there on scholarships from, under the scholarships in Taiwan. And one of them made a comment and they said, you know what, we have noted that during typhoons, the power stays on in Taiwan. And they are aware that when we're here back in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis, sometimes it's just a tropical storm and we have island-wide outage. So we were able to actually have visited the Taiwan Power Company and to have some dialogues and learn of some of the strategies that they deploy towards being able to build very resilient grids. And these are some of the memorandums of understandings that we wish to establish and be able to further and be able to then progress the electricity and energy sector, not just in St. Kitts, but also St. Kitts and Nevis, and be looking, of course, in the future of the deployment of renewable technologies such as solar, wind, geothermal, and interconnected and resilient grid. So briefly just touching on those things that I've mentioned before, I will not take up all of the time here on the mic, but we look forward to furthering those bilateral relations and progressing, of course, our sustainable island state agenda, particularly in the green energy and energy transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. A pleasant and good morning to everyone. The established protocol being observed. Our mission to Taiwan was a trade and investment promotion mission. We were driven by a singular purpose, and that is to build stronger and forge economic and trade cooperation with Taiwan. We have a long standing relationship with Taiwan, approximately about 40 years since our independence. This mission provided a very unique platform to promote the exchange of goods and services, and also enabling us to connect our thriving industries with international markets. Such collaborations are essential for fostering a sustainable economic growth and creating opportunities for our citizens. By engaging with investors in Taiwan and with stakeholders during this mission, we were provided with the opportunity to open doors for transformative partnerships in vital sectors such as tourism, agriculture, ICT, renewable energy, and international education services. Just to highlight also, agriculture is one of the areas that stood out to me in terms of smart agriculture. So I guess we can also explore that opportunity as well too. These investments can catalyze progress, which can bring new jobs to our nation, expertise, and resources to our shores. Beyond the economic realm, this mission offered us the chance to access invaluable knowledge and technology. Taiwan's expertise in renewable energy and other sustainable development aligns perfectly with our goal of advancing green industrial transformation and building climate resilience. This is essential for us to reach our goal of becoming a sustainable island state. Together we can create solutions that benefit not only our nation, but also the global economy. Equally important are the diplomatic bridges that we strengthened through such, thank you. Through such endeavors. During our mission, we were able to meet officials at the highest level, from the president himself, Dr. Lai, and the foreign minister himself, Dr. Lin. Solidifying our relationship with international partners like Taiwan enhances our presence on the world stage and also fosters collaborative efforts that will lift both our nations. As we showcase St. Kitts and Nevis to the world, we carry with us a compelling story. That is, a nation with modern infrastructure, a stable economy, and an environment that is ripe for investment. We took this opportunity to ensure that St. Kitts and Nevis is ready for them to come. We also had the opportunity to discuss renewable energy and how far we are in terms of geothermal. And it was discovered that St. Kitts and Nevis were, I don't want to say more advanced, but is able to even lend our support, our ideas, what we have done so far, to Taiwan. So it's not just us going to get or to receive, but also to share our experiences in terms of geothermal. In conclusion, from my end, focusing on international trade, I was able to have a conversation regarding our ongoing economic partnership cooperation agreement with Taiwan. This agreement provides us with the legal framework how we can do trade. It covers investment opportunities as well to enhance trade relations, diplomatic relations, and investment opportunities. It also covers the idea of technology and technology transfer as well too, and economic diversification. Now these are broad terms, but at the end of the day, it results in the subheadings, for example, our food security, creating jobs and economic wealth. So our mission, I should say, has already begun to bear fruits. We continue to have conversations, meaningful conversations from our mission, and it's still ongoing. And in the not too distant future, we'll have a follow-up on this and this mission to show that the mission was indeed a success.
Good morning, all. The benefit of speaking last means that all the other speakers would have already highlighted most of the important things that had to be highlighted. I just wanted to add just a few things. The Chamber was certainly grateful for the opportunity to be a part of the delegation to go to the Republic of China, Taiwan, at this time in this economic mission. We see development, as you all should, as not being just a statal function, but one that the private sector is integrally involved in. It is important that the private sector is along with the government to ensure that we could achieve what the government is seeking to achieve in terms of becoming a sustainable island state. The private sector is the engine of growth in the economy, and it's important that we play a pivotal role in getting to that degree of development. My colleagues on the panel would have already spoken about the numerous visits that we had. For the Chamber, it was instructive. I certainly found it very enlightening and opened my eyes to a lot. It's my first time to the Republic of China and Taiwan. But at the seminar, we were able to re-engage with the CICA, for example, which is the Chinese International Economic Cooperation Association, with which the Chamber had an agreement dating back to 2014. But we were able to rekindle that relationship, and hopefully we will be able to build on that going forward. We also, in visits to the Ministry of Economic Affairs, we also were able to get some information on an international food fair that is held annually in Taiwan, which some of our members in terms of producers of beverages, food product, etc., and even textiles, to be able to showcase their product, etc., at those fora in the future. So we see this as a very, very useful visit. The focus for the main part was on renewable energy, but that is important as well, because energy cost is one of the major costs of businesses in the Federation, as it is across the world. So it's important that if we are to achieve the level of development we want to achieve, if we are able to make the progress we need to make, to grow our businesses, etc., it's important that we have energy cost that is affordable and will help us to, path to development. So we saw that as being very important. Hopefully we'll be able to build relationships, joint ventures, etc., partnerships, representations as well of some of the companies that are seeking to do business in the Federation. So we think the private sector would have benefited from this visit. Thank you.
Right. So there we've had the introductory remarks from the members of the delegation of the mission that went on to Taiwan, trade promotion, investment promotion, and strengthen, of course, the diplomatic ties. I will now invite the members of the press or media personnel who are here to ask your questions, if you have any question at all, because because it has been, yes. The mic, how do you do this? Yes.
We're gonna undo the mic so that people can move around freely. So what's gonna happen is that we're gonna ask the journalists to speak, and then I'll take it up to whoever needs to.
Dr. Douglas, going to on a mission like this, yes, it is very important. The topic, energy, renewable energy, also very important. As you indicated, energy cost is a major factor in business. But those are long-term, necessary discussions, but long-term aims. For the ordinary citizen, the ordinary man in the street, in the villages and so forth, who are looking for opportunities for jobs, etc., they want to see things that are more immediate. In this particular mission, how are you going to, or how would you measure success in terms of job creation coming out of this mission for citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis?
German Abel, SKN Vibes. I have a container full of questions for you guys, so just excuse me as I prioritize them. I'm going to start with geopolitics first. We heard, and Dr. Douglas, you touched this in your opening remarks, Cuba, St. Kitts, doctors, issue particularly. Secretary of State Rubio, who was in Jamaica recently, indicated that he does not have a problem, or the United States does not have a problem with the quote-unquote doctors' medical brigade coming specifically to the region, but rather it is the way in which the doctors are being paid, or the medical professionals are being paid. One, can you speak to how that operation works in terms of the payment? And also, you went to, prior to your travels, you went to the OAS, and you had indicated then that you would seek to engage with U.S. officials on this particular issue. Can you say whether or not that discussion was had, and what sort of feedback you got pertaining to that specifically? And one other question, this has to do specifically with Venezuela. Does St. Kitts and Nevis still import fuel or any oil-related products from Venezuela? And what specifically is your position, or St. Kitts and Nevis' position, on the issue or the statement put out by the State Department that one, sanctions could be had on companies that import or deal specifically with oil and gas from Venezuela, as well as possible tariffs, quote unquote, coming out from countries shipping fuel and so forth from Venezuela. And to the chamber, there's also this discussion of $1.5 million being levied against ships coming out, Chinese-made vessels from passing through the United States. That's going to be levied in terms of tariffs. how is the chamber preparing specifically for this, and your members preparing for a potential increase in goods and services, as well as taking into consideration St. Kitts and Nevis' economy?
Thank you, Mr. Bat and what's his name? Abel. The immediate returns. The immediate returns start immediately, in the sense that we have to begin at some point. And we have to also continue from that point where we are today with the relationship that was established several years ago. Of course, we speak of the need to have cheaper electricity. One of the immediate things that will happen is at least 2 investors have indicated their interest in providing solar energy panels constructed here using the technology that we witnessed ourselves when we visited the appropriate factory in Taiwan last week. We did have, in the past, as you would know, a number of solar panels installations for the government's benefit at the RLB International Airport, you would recall, and also at the roundabout there at the Central Bank going into Frigate Bay. Re-engagement has taken place. Those companies that provided those 2 small, maybe we can say experimental plants, are prepared to go further, especially since the technology has improved. Now, Mr. Kelly was able to point out that there were certain specific issues and maybe challenges that were provided, because once they were installed, you would remember that the government that succeeded the Labour government after 2015 seemed not to have paid much attention to those already installed outfits. So we have therefore looked at this as immediately returning to bringing renewable energy in the form of solar energy on the rooftops of residential homes, so that we would be able to, with the support of SCELEC, have domestic production of solar energy with the appropriate technology and systems attached. They would be able to most likely send energy back into the national grid. That is the excess beyond which is used domestically in their homes. And here is where again it became important for us to speak seriously, and Mr. Kelly and his counterparts, the importance of artificial intelligence, ensuring that there's a smart system that will now operate within SCELEC, so that any feedback to the national grid of SCELEC will not destabilize the entire system. Or, as you would have heard, again demonstrated in a different way, when the hurricanes would pass, etc., there is need to stabilize the grid. And so there is going to be investment in ensuring that the national grid is a smart national grid, so that it can detect the threats to its instability and shut down accordingly, as would be directed from the intelligence gathered from the appropriate machines. I don't know if Kelly wants to speak to this later on, but the returns are immediate, because immediately we are sensitizing our people to get into the support of this new thrust by having solar panels on their homes. So the immediate returns. And I don't have to mention about the increasing in the number of scholarships we demanded and received on the spot. An increased number of scholarships in certain specific areas that the government believe is absolutely necessary for us to churn out new trained minds in those areas that we have identified to be critical to assist us to attain the sustainable island state that we speak of. The matter with regard to Rubio, Secretary of State Rubio, yes, Rubio came to the Caribbean region. St. Kitts and Nevis was not one of those countries that had any bilateral discussions with him. But when I was in Washington 2.5, 3 weeks ago, we did meet with an envoy of the Secretary of State who met with the foreign ministers of CARICOM and discussed a number of matters. Of course, the Cuban situation was one of those. I think it was made very clear at that meeting, and I will go on to part of your question also that spoke to what St. Kitts and Nevis is doing with regard to the specific concerns that Rubio and others would have identified. The payment, the salaries of the Cuban doctors and Cuban trained personnel who are here in St. Kitts and Nevis. That meeting in Washington, we were able to outline to the envoy that each of us would have had different arrangements. And in fact, I specifically said that St. Kitts and Nevis arrangement is open, it is fair, it does not contribute to slave labor, it does not contribute in any way to the further dehumanization of Cuban people as is being accused, not at all. And we have examined all of the contracts and the agreements that we have signed with the Cuban government and with the individual personnel. They each have their bank accounts. Their salaries are similar to the salaries that we would pay our own local doctors who went anywhere in the world to be trained, have returned with their knowledge and practicing and hired by governments. The amenities that are provided to them, housing, etc., are the very same of our own nationals who are working here. And we have shared that with the United States government. We are not part of that. St. Kitts and Nevis is operating a clean arrangement with the Cuban nationals who provide services here for our people. We have examined, the Attorney General's office has examined all of the contracts, because we not only have Cubans here who are providing medical services, but we have them also in the Ministry of Works. We have a number of engineers who are doing contracting work with the ministry. And that agreement, I have seen it myself, does not in any way dehumanize the Cubans. Everything is above board, and we have emphasized that to the United States government with regard to the situation. Of course, the United States has said, well, we're interested in best practices, and they made certain suggestions as to what could be the best practices. But their best practices do not in any way injure our best practices as well. And so we are able to continue to provide the services to our people that is required, because our people need the services that are being obtained from the Cubans. With regard to the Venezuela situation, at the moment, I am told that although we are a member, and we are a proud member of PDVSA, as you would know, I was one of the original signatories to PDVSA. You would remember that Hugo Chavez was invited here. The only place in the Eastern Caribbean he came was here when Petrocarib had their conference here. So we continue to have a relationship. At the moment, as I said, I do not think that we are actually purchasing products from Venezuela, mainly because we've had some problems with approval of the vessel that will be doing the transportation normally. Right, approval of the vessel that would be doing the transportation normally in docking here in St. Kitts and Nevis. There are certain specific requirements that were made, and unless the vessel is retrofitted to meet those requirements that have been initiated by the St. Kitts government, St. Kitts Nevis government, and the companies that store, etc., then there is no, at the moment, there is no purchase of products directly from Venezuela. I will check that, but the last time I was told, I checked, I was told that, and I will check again. Okay?
Thank you. On the matter of the levy that the U.S. is seeking to impose on Chinese-built or registered vessels calling on Chinese port, I mean, that could have a very, very heavy adverse impact on prices. Everything that is imported into the Federation is either, well, most things I should say, is either transshipped or through the U.S. So that is of significant concern to all of us, and it should be. There are a number of fronts it is being addressed. The shipping companies like Tropical, etc., they are lobbying the U.S. government. The private sector organization, the CARICOM private sector organization, is having a major consultation on that. We at the Chamber are engaging our membership on that. So we are seeking to address that on a number of fronts. We trust that good sense will prevail, but because I don't think there's a way around it. So unless that is somewhat rolled back, it would have a very, very deleterious impact on our cost of living, because the $1 million per call, or 1.5 million a call, is significant, and that price, those fees would have to be passed on to the importers of the goods, and further passed on to the public. So it's something that we're hoping that we could have rolled back.
Is there any assurances from the Chamber to consumers that they will not necessarily feel a 100, 200% markup? Let's be frank. We're living in a world where businesses want to make money, and quote unquote here again, and I guess this goes back to consumer fears, that consumers would not necessarily see this big price hike coming anytime in the near future from these businesses, especially the fact that we're seeing the $1.5 million potentially coming in, the US president and his administration sticking to their policies that this is what we want, or you guys feel the crunch of it as well. How are you educating the public on these tariffs, because people are still lost? In some sections of the international media, they're reporting that Trump says X, that the US people wouldn't feel it, and some people are running with that, and then there are also some who understand it, but they're not necessarily educating the masses about that. Just to go back to Dr. Douglas, following up, are you saying, just to clarify, that the Cuban doctors, medical practitioners in the Federation, that they're being paid directly into their accounts, as against the suggestion by the U.S. Secretary of State that, and I don't know if he was also including the Caribbean in this, that you pay the Cuban government and they take a percentage out of that and they pass it on, and then they pay the doctors the rest. I'm just seeking clarification on that. And also on this matter of Venezuela, can you state what St. Kitts and Nevis' position on this ongoing border clash between Venezuela and Guyana? We saw recently that a military vessel was in Guyana's water, basically questioning Exxon's operation in the Stabroek block. And there was some concern, and it flared up again. And now we're seeing last night that Venezuela responded to Secretary Rubio's statements while he was in Guyana, basically saying that, paraphrasing here, it's inflammatory statements which can again rile up the ongoing border controversy that's happening down there.
One of the things that I'm wondering about is the situation with the Citizenship by Investment program. Is this program really on its way out? Because the reason I asked that question, it seems to me after all of the various legislative changes that were made last year, all of the regulatory changes and improvements that were made, it seems as if the Parliament of the European Union is getting closer to placing or removing the visa-free access for Schengen countries of the Union. If that happens, essentially the Citizenship by Investment program is practically dead. So if that happens, if that is the way they're going, is there anything that St. Kitts and Nevis can do, plus the other islands that are involved with it in the Eastern Caribbean? How can they respond to something like that? And in connection also to the CBI, we are also looking at the travel ban proposed by the United States. What discussions are going on behind the scenes with regards St. Kitts and Nevis or the Eastern Caribbean, or the Caribbean for that matter, with the government of the United States in relation to the Citizenship by Investment program and fears that they have concerning our programs?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Batts, and of course also Abel, for your comments and question. Again, the situation with regard to the arrangement between the St. Kitts and Nevis government and the Cuban providers of technical services, that arrangement is an arrangement that stands up anywhere in the world, because the arrangement is very similar to what we do make with our own local doctors and service providers generally to the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. Their salaries are paid directly to them into their accounts. The rate of pay is similar to what the government of St. Kitts and Nevis will pay to a doctor who is born in St. Kitts and Nevis and went away to study, or any recruited doctor from abroad, whether it is from the United States of America or Canada or the United Kingdom or Cuba. All of them are treated in the same way. The vacation is provided for. There was a question as to whether they have their own passports or we hold in their. We do not tell people what to do with their passports. They have their own passports. We don't hold their passports. Whenever the time comes for the contract to be ended and they have to return to their countries, St. Kitts and Nevis does not in any way have to ask the Cuban government as to whether they can come home. They have signed individual contracts with the government in order to provide services. The vacation period, everything is as normal as it would have been. So I don't think that, with respect, that the distinguished Secretary of State, Rubio, is making any specific reference to St. Kitts and Nevis. In fact, one of the things that we pointed out to the envoy when we were in Washington about 3 weekends ago, even in situations like Barbados, some of the bankers, we understand, were afraid, reluctant to allow them to open accounts because of what is out there with regard to international sanctions to bankers and banks who would do business with Cuba. Luckily, when I came back here and I inquired, that did not seem to be a problem with our bankers here in St. Kitts and Nevis. So even at that point where there might have been a technical interpretation, here in St. Kitts and Nevis, it doesn't apply. I am very, very confident that we are not in any way violating any of the international norms with regard to foreign persons providing services in a foreign country. And nothing that we do violates any of the international charters, the UN charters, with regard to recruiting labor from overseas. We are above board on that particular matter, and we have made it absolutely clear through correspondence with the United States government through the embassy in Barbados that we are doing everything above board. We have shared what we are doing. We have shared all of the information that I have just given you to the U.S. authorities on this particular matter. So I really do not see any unnecessary concern for St. Kitts and Nevis government officials to suffer as a result of the recruitment of Cubans to work here in St. Kitts and Nevis. With regard to the situation with Venezuela and Guyana, we have always asked that there be restraint and that there be an approach of calmness in dealing with this matter. There are still some outstanding solutions from the international community on this Venezuela-Guyana border issue. Of course, the presence of U.S. or foreign investors drilling in an area that is considered to be disputed by the two parties, of course, that is a matter that is creating the problem. And we are asking as a government that this matter be treated with calmness, with continued dialogue and negotiations, just as there was the meeting of minds last year at Argyle. We are again asking that there be calm, there be understanding as these two countries sort out what is becoming a major political crisis and hope it does not escalate into anything beyond that. Again, CARICOM calls for calm, and St. Kitts and Nevis supports CARICOM's call for this matter to be resolved peacefully rather than through any other means. The CBI. The CBI, that is the Citizenship by Investment Program for St. Kitts and Nevis, has been a major contributor to the development of St. Kitts and Nevis. Our budget, if you look at it, it is budgeted that we would have a major contribution from the CBI in order to finance the services that the government will provide to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis. We know that the EU has been anxious in terms of ensuring that the visa-free status that they would have granted through the arrangement that they have with some countries in the Caribbean region, that be preserved and not be violated in any way. What is the concern of the EU? Concern of the EU is that persons who we have prevented from coming into our territories end up with a passport from one of those countries that we have a visa-free arrangement with, and they enter into the EU territories, where there would have been obvious evidence that this would have happened, where those persons who might have been prevented in the past were able to get citizenship from other countries and enter through the Schengen arrangement, the EU took action swiftly and discontinued those countries to be members of the Schengen arrangement. So citizens from those countries now would have to apply like anyone else for a visa to enter the Schengen countries. We have been very careful not to find ourselves in that situation. Recently in the news, maybe last week, the EU, well, not the EU, sorry, the UK. The UK itself, United Kingdom, whereas Trinidadians were able to go into the UK without any visa, they now have. And they also have to make sure that the necessary pre-travel has to be met. The conditions for pre-travel have to be met through completing the ESTA, I think it is, ET. So that also has been imposed recently, because again, they are saying that some, it would appear, Trinidadians, once they get there, apply for asylum. And so they have decided to take that action. So we are hoping that our CBI program does not get affected by matters of that kind. But I want to make a more fundamental point, that if it were to be so, that we would have lost the Schengen arrangement, that does not mean the CBI program is dead. I want to make that clear. There are factors now globally that drive the CBI program, not just being able to enter a country as a businessman without a visa. There are factors globally that drive the CBI programs around the world. The world is in conflict. more and more zones in the world are in conflict. People, therefore, are moving. And so the CBI program is global. It's a global phenomenon. It is not a St. Kitts Nevis economic development phenomenon. It is not an Eastern Caribbean development phenomenon or initiative. It is global because of what is happening around the world. People are moving because they move away from conflict zones. And they would invest and invest in order to be given a document so that they can travel to a land, a country where there's peace. One of the countries and one of the features that was very prominent when we were in Taiwan is the CBI. People are very much interested in it. I don't think they are doing it to get to go into Europe without a visa. No. They have heard of this country, which is a paradise, and they want to be part of it. We don't give people passports just like that. We don't sell them. I make that point all along. We don't sell passports. St. Kitts and Nevis invite you to invest in our country. And if you invest in our country, and you would have obtained the money that you invested with from clean sources, then we then invite you to become a citizen. We invite you to become a citizen. We don't sell passports. Maybe some countries do, but we don't do that here in St. Kitts and Nevis. We invite investors who have been successful in their investment in our country. We say, brother, you're part of us now. Here's a travel document that you can use. We invite people. We don't sell passports. And so I am one of those who believe that because of what is happening in the world globally with so many conflict zones, the CBI will never die. Okay?
If I may address the question you posed about guarantees with regard to cost of living, we cannot at this point give any guarantees of that. As we know, the costs of the goods, I mean, we import almost everything. And the cost of the goods is built up from the cost, insurance, and freight. Freight will be impacted by the measure if the U.S. proceeds with it. So that means that is an additional cost. And, you know, on top of that, the duties and everything is calculated on the CIF values. So we can't, at this point, say that there will not be any increases. What we will say is that we will try to see to do whatever we could to prevent that measure from being imposed. So whatever influences we could bring to bear on the U.S. authorities so that imposition is rolled back. We will certainly do all that it could because it's going to affect everything, every single thing. Yeah.
Final two from me. One, Dr. Douglas, we are now seeing that 140 people died in the Thailand, Myanmar earthquake this morning. Have you reached out to the officials over there to say anything to them or so? And also, with the mass deportation in the US and all this talk, and a lot of people are being turned back at the ports, can you say how many residents, nationals of St. Kitts and Nevis have been returned since Trump has taken office under his quote-unquote mass deportation order? And just to add quickly, a third question to that, piggybacking on your CBI response, the U.S. is now heading towards this quote-unquote golden passport era under Trump. This is what he has proposed. Are you concerned that the measures and recommendations in terms of this quote-unquote travel restrictions. St. Kitts and Nevis was listed under some grouping potential and potential visa restrictions and so forth. That this initiative or proposal by the U.S. President is in conflict with what St. Kitts and Nevis and the rest of the Caribbean is doing under its CBI program.
And if I could go back to the matters of investment. Many years ago, back in the 80s, I believe, on the Caribbean Basin Initiative, many of the companies that we saw coming to St. Kitts, establishing the industrial estates at Ponds and also in Sandy Point, have sort of died a sort of slow death due to changes in global production, cost of production, and that kind of thing. With many companies going to China, where the costs were lower. A country like St. Kitts and Nevis today, with its high energy cost, and we are going out there trying to attract investment into our country. How does that really work? Because what do we have to offer a company coming out of Taiwan to come to St. Kitts to do any kind of production or set up an educational facility, that kind of thing? How would that work in the sense that St. Kitts and Nevis at the moment has a rather high level of costs associated with investment?
Right. I think, again, these questions are very, very important, very searching, very educational, because with regard to the position that is being pursued by the present U.S. administration, whether it conflicts with our own pursuits of development, so the CBI and so forth, I think with time we would be able to better assess those things, because you would have noticed what happened in the case of Canada. A number of things are rolled out, Canada responds, pushes back, and adjustments are made, or a holding situation develops. I don't know if you saw the video of one of those cabinet meetings where our boy Elon Musk was under the fire from his own cabinet colleagues. And then President Trump made the announcement, we were told, well, so the press says, that Musk is not supposed to initiate cuttings and so forth. The secretaries of state, or the secretaries of the various departments, I would say, should be the ones to do that. Only if there's a problem, then Elon Musk comes in with the chainsaw and cuts accordingly. You remember that. So I think what we are seeing here is really what the U.S. new administration is doing. It said it would do certain things. It is pursuing what it would have said as part of its electioneering mandate. The U.S. system is complex as to whether a lot of the presidential, what should I say, dictates, whether they are going to be allowed within the complex U.S. system, especially with the judicial powers of the court. We will see whether a lot of what has been announced will be pursued to their logical ends eventually. You asked about the deportations, how many of our nationals, so-called illegals or so-called criminals would have been sent back here. I do not have any figure, but I know we have received correspondence from the U.S. government to the embassy, basically outlining our obligation as a country under the international laws, where we have to receive any citizen who is returned, and also inquired whether we were willing to accept non-St. Kitts Nevis nationals who are being deported if we are in a position to receive any of those. Of course, I believe that there is an established protocol since in the days before this present presidency, where we would want to be able to check for ourselves whether persons identified to be returned to us are really our citizens. Because in the past, our mission in Washington would have identified 1 or 2 persons several years ago, 1 or 2 Jamaicans who love St. Kitts, they hear of St. Kitts, and say they want to go to St. Kitts. And we said, no, we accepting our nationals if the conditions have been worked out. And so the U.S. at the moment is aware, we are aware that there are certain conventions that allow for petitions divisions who are serving time in the States, in prisons, for them to be negotiated, to be returned, and continue to serve their sentences here in our prisons. That has been a recent communication between our 2 foreign affairs. And so this is a matter that I'm sure will be given serious discussion before we can allow any of our citizens who is serving there to be returned here to serve here in prison. That is one of the emerging matters that we are discussing. So a lot of things are happening, but we are mindful that it is important to have discussions on these things and not anything to be forced upon you, because that's not the way friends should behave in the international setting. So that is a matter that is being worked on as well. The manufacturing sector. You're right. We have serious challenges with the manufacturing sector. The manufacturing sector was created, what, 30, 40 years ago, maybe? All the way back in the 80s. It's just 2 weeks ago we were looking at it. The US had come in and had assisted us. In fact, a number of manufacturers who were in Puerto Rico were told that if you would only bring your plants here, you would be treated as if they are in Puerto Rico still. No taxes and so forth. The tariffs and so forth were controlled. So a number of factories came here. Only 2 have remained. We would have had, I'm sure, more than 15, 20. But 2 weeks ago we did an assessment and only 2. Jaro and Harrow, server control in Sandy Point. And Jaro Electronics here. We therefore have invited the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, that is in Austria, one of the UN permanent offices, to come and assist us, study the present industrial sector here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and advise us how best we can reactivate or what it is we need to do to transition from the state that it is in to the next level where manufacturing continues to be an important input into the economy of St. Kitts and Nevis. Because we can't afford to allow that to just simply die. One of the first things that I had done, maybe I was a little too mischievous, was asking the Taiwanese to bring semiconductor industry here. I remember traveling to Canada with the Prime Minister after we had war. We went to the bilateral summit between CARICOM and Canada, and we had organized a lunch with Taiwanese representative there in Canada and made that request. And it was then outlined that it might be difficult. And when we went to, when we were there in Taipei last week, we visited one of the factories that provide solar panels. And the operation, we are told, is very similar to the semiconductor industry. But if we do not get the semiconductor industry here, some aspect of high tech we would want here in St. Kitts and Nevis to be part of the new thrust in our manufacturing enclave. And we would see how that can be done. President said he was going to invest how many billions in Taiwan recently? $200 billion, and we are saying, just give us a few million of that in St. Kitts. We are a good partner to you. So we are working around the clock to change the industrial landscape with regard to the contribution it can make to the economy here in St. Kitts and Nevis. I don't know if you want to say it.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Douglas. Mr. Bart, it is? Yes, to your question, very, very good question. And I specifically note that you made reference to the high energy cost and how that could be prohibitive for attracting foreign manufacturing and investment of that. And you're on point. Because I think we are all aware right now that even in the commercial sector right now, when you look at the electricity cost, there is a significant component of what is called the fuel surcharge. And sometimes that can be almost equivalent to the actual energy charge itself, or even more, depending on how the volatility of the fuel market price is. So the conversation about energy transition and diversification to renewable energy, it is something that is very real and urgent, as it underpins providing access to clean, reliable, and affordable energy that can then facilitate economic diversification. So this is very, very key. And the sooner that we're able to exploit and develop our renewable energy resources, we will then be in a position to be able to attract and provide the sort of market and incentivization for developing that manufacturing sector. Now, just to piggyback on what Dr. Douglas has said, while we're in Taiwan, those conversations around Taiwanese semiconductor industry, and particularly TSMC, which is one of the largest chip makers in the world, NVIDIA and all of those different things, I asked a question to one of the counterparts over there, what would it take to have a foundry in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis? He started to laugh. And he said, we probably will consume all of the electricity that St. Kitts and Nevis could probably generate, which is about 45 megawatts for just one foundry. The entire St. Kitts and Nevis is probably our electricity demand in terms of the peak power is probably just around that. But think about it. Collectively, if you look at the resources energy-wise for renewable between St. Kitts and Nevis, over in Nevis is approximately 1,000 megawatts, 1 gigawatts of geothermal potential that is untapped. We have solar potential, we have wind potential. So in other words, we can actually, if we are very responsive and quick, develop those resources to be able to now say, we have capacity, bring your industry, we can provide you with reliable and cheap energy that would then be an economic driver. Furthermore, when you were asking a question earlier about employment, I was told that one of those factories requires approximately 8,000 skilled workers. Just imagine that set of numbers. So, as we said now, once we build the capacity, once we provide the energy, the manufacturing sector will come. Thank you very much.
I think I'm going to close now because we have run out of time. But in closing, I want to say specifically that we made a number of asks of the Taiwanese government, and we believe that we will have responses. We have asked for an increase in the number of MOFA scholarships in priority areas for St. Kitts and Nevis. They would be granted. We have asked for assistance to increase our renewable energy capacity by 50% by the year 2030. That will be supported. We have asked for technical assistance with our grid modernization. That will be provided. We have asked for exchange of best practices. For example, geothermal energy, that is critically important to us. We have been given the assurance that they will work with other countries that we have already asked to make this possible. Assistance with energy storage will also be provided. Assistance with building resilience of electrical infrastructure to withstand hurricanes will be provided. And assistance with the construction of a new home for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will be pursued aggressively. I want to thank, therefore, the Taiwanese government for receiving us. I want to thank the private sector people who came to our seminar. Almost 50 people were there, if not more, at our seminar. I want to also, of course, thank the local ambassador of Taiwan here in St. Kitts and Nevis, Ambassador Lee, and his team for putting this program together and working closely with our own ambassador there in Taiwan, His Excellency Doña Francis, to make this possible. I want to end by saying we continue to expand our footprint diplomatically. More and more persons are requesting to become consuls to represent our country, and we are giving them due consideration and assessment. As we do that, we also are losing some. And I want to thank Mark Williams, who is our Senior Economic Planning Officer in the Ministry of Economic Development and Investment, for his services to the public servant, to the people of St. Kitts and Nevis as a public servant, because he would have retired and soon would be taking up position with regard to a more regional hemispheric job that he has been successful in securing. Let us therefore thank him and his family for his services and wish him the best as he moves on to another capacity. Thank you all, members of the press.